Welcome to another video in the Unity 3D first-person shooter series for beginners in Unity. In this video, we're going to create a terrain and start shaping it in our world. So to create a terrain, I can right-click here in the hierarchy. And under 3D object, I have an option there for terrain. So I'm going to click on that. And this big white ground area comes up in my screen view. I'm just going to scroll out a bit. Excellent. And just make sure your tool is on move, and you can move it where you want, but usually the defaults are right. Okay, so when you select your terrain and you look here in the inspector, a whole bunch of options for the terrain shows up. This first one is the raise and lower terrain. So if I click on it, a whole bunch of brushes are going to come up, and these brushes affect what type of effect you want your terrain to have. For example, if I click on this plain circle and I just mouse here and click around, I'm kind of creating like a mountain, like a smoothie kind of mountain. Right now, shortcut, if I press my right mouse button down, I can rotate around the space. And if I press my middle mouse button, my scroll button, I can pan around my space. So that's what that's what that solid circle means. If you hold in Shift and click and drag, it will reduce the size of it. Like so. Alright, so I have like kind of a mountain range look. Now if I test that with this spray brush looking one, and I click down here, you have a whole bunch of rugged type land. And same thing, if I hit Shift, I can clear it out a bit. Now these brushes also have a brush size, so affecting how big an area you want to cover at once, and a opacity affecting pretty much how strong you want it to be. For example, if I make it 100, and I click on this solid circle, I'll just make this 100 so you can see. And I click, and I just drag around. See how quickly that raised? Now, if I drag that back to 6, oops, I'll keep the brush size at 100, and I'll drag this back, I don't know, to 12, and I'll click and drag around. It rises much slower. So I'm just going to undo that, melt it back down. So you can kind of get cool effects by building and melting different parts. Like you wanted like a cave kind of looking thing, you could create that with this effect. Now this next terrain tool is to paint a height. So if I click that and I select, so the brushes are the same as before, but here I have an another option for a maximum height. So if I wanted a maximum height of 15, so if I want like a flat top, I can click in here and build, and no matter how much I click and drag, the top will have a maximum height of what you of the size that you put in here in the height. Now the next one is the smooth height. So you can see here, I'm going to make my opacity slightly larger so you see an effect. How these mountain ranges are all fairly jagged. If I click, I can kind of smooth them out with its smooth effect. And paint texture is to add textures. Now, in the last video, we imported some assets in our standard assets folder. So first we're going to have to import some textures. So similar to how we imported that standard assets package, I'm going back to import package, and I want to look for environment. So I'm going to click on environment. And this environment package has a whole bunch of textures for like grass, ice, rocks, water, things like that. And it also has, why none of these selected by default? Oh, there they are. And it also has, you know, trees and things like that that we can use. And we'll use some of them soon. So I'm going to hit import, wait for Unity to import it. Excellent. And all of those also go into this standard assets folder. So I saved it here in environment. And you can see there's some trees, some terrain assets, etc. So I'm going to open terrain assets so we can see what kind of textures we've got. We've got a cliff, a grass, a rock, a mud rocky, and a sand texture. If you need more, you can just find them online easily. So I'll click back on my terrain, go back to my paint tool, and here I have an options for edit textures. I'm going to click on that and add a texture. Then I'm going to, in this first box, hit select, and I'll bring up all the textures that I can possibly add. And you want to find one that you're going to be using as your main texture. So for example, in my world, I want it to be predominantly grassy. Actually, I'll make it predominantly sandy. Where's sand? There. We go. And I'll hit add. And you can see it's made my whole terrain sandy. Then I'm going to do that again. Edit, add textures. And I'm going to choose a different one this time. So let's say I want some grass rock. I'll add that and hit add. Now if I select it here, I can now choose a brush and just paint it on. So I have that brush over there. I'm going to make that brush size much smaller and the opacity smaller. Now the opacity when it comes to painting textures is how well it blends. So it's better to have a low opacity and then multiple repaints than to just try and do it all at once. I'm going to try and make this hill look all rocky. As you can see, all I'm doing is clicking and dragging and painting it on. Right. Now, I'm not too happy with that 12. So what I'm going to do, that 24 opacity. So I'm going to make that slightly higher just to have a more rocky look. And I'm just going to repaint again. It's better. And continue. And I have to do that all the way around. So just as a reminder, your right mouse button will allow you to rotate and your middle button will allow you to scroll. There we go. And you can add more. So here you can see that world's not blended too well. Right. You can slowly just make the opacity less. Just blend around it. And then even lesser. And just spray a bit around here. And slowly blend it. I know you can see the lines, that's because I didn't make the opacity strong enough. But from high up, it's not very noticeable. Cool. And I'll make a little bit of a grass area. So I'll edit textures, add another texture. Hit select on this first one, look for some grass, that one. Hit add. And this time I'm going to make the opacity slightly bigger. And I'll also make my brush bigger. And I'm just going to paint a whole bunch of grass area. Like that. Make the opacity smaller. Continue around. And the target strength, also smaller. But do you see what I'm trying to do? Just slowly blend it until you're happy with your world result. And I'll make a bit up here as well. Yeah, that's fine. Excellent. So we can test it out now after our terrain. Actually, I'll go through all the tools first. So that was to paint one on. Now if I click on paint trees, which is this next one here, in our terrain tools, I can hit edit tree and add tree. Now this window pops up. You want to click on this little circle to add a tree prefab. So I've clicked on it, and we have a couple of tree prefabs that came custom with our environment package. So I'm going to add some palm trees to the desert area. And just looking at some of the options, you want to make the tree density low and do multiple repaints because trees take a lot of CPU power. Surrender. I'll make that brush size smaller as well. Might make this area just litter it a bit. That's fine. Some sprinkling. I'm happy with that. There's a rough 1 or 2 around here. And then I'm going to add another tree. And I don't know, add some of this to my grass area. And I'll make the density slightly larger. Whoops. Cool, that's to add trees. And then there's other small details that we can do soon, but we'll leave that out for now. Okay, now I'm going to hit play just to test out my world, have a look around, which I won't really be able to because my camera's down here and I don't have a character, but you can see that it's all rendering in 3D for now. And let's add a character just so we can go exploring. So in our standard assets in characters, which is in the first package we installed, we have an option for a first person, and I want to go to prefabs and look for something called FPS control. And I just want to drag that anywhere in my game and zoom in. Cool. I'm just going to click my move tool and drag him up a bit. Actually, I'll drag him high up and then he can fall down. And now when I hit play, the camera comes to me. So I'm down, and you can use the WASD keys to move around your world. Go exploring, space key to jump. So I'm just coming to the ground, so you can kind of see the ground line where the opacities didn't match, like in front of me. However, it doesn't look as bad as it did in the scene. So as I'm walking around, it doesn't look too bad. Let's go have a look at the difference between the desert and the grass. So you can see my rocky hill over there. See, that's the difference between the desert and grass. It's not too bad. It's kind of blended fairly nicely. It definitely doesn't look as bad as it made it out in the scene. Cool. Now to escape, you just press the escape key and then hit play again. Do not hit pause. Pause will just pause the game, but it'll still be running in the background. Make sure you hit on the play to stop it. Cool, once you got that set up, that's the end of this video, and you'll be ready for the next video where we'll start arranging our first-person shooter and trying to shoot a bullet or so.